about soccer!
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us on this Grimsby edition of Celebrity Squares. We will be taking you through some of the questions that we've got. We've got quite a few of the team on as well, as they'd like to ask their own stuff. But first and foremost, welcome to Andrew, who is in the back of an Uber. How are you, Andy? Andrew? He's good. How are you, Jason?
I'm really well. I'm not in the back of an Uber. I'm in the, at my home, in my office. But I think we're trying to raise some money for the playing budget. So Andrew's driving for Uber at the moment on the side.
The question is if it's an Uber Lux or not. If there's an extra marker. Yeah.
Look at that. Of course it is.
And Debbie's there with inflatable in hand for Saturday.
What inflatable?
Don't get it anywhere near the stewards' heads. I think we're going to have to take some hard hats along just to help them out. How's everything with you as well? Lovely background.
Yeah, all good, thank you. Yeah, all great.
Perfect.
And I saw that Christine put out tonight that inflatables will be allowed at Barnet.
Christine hates when Barnet comes along because she always ends up messaging me at some point going, "What in God's name have you done this time?"
Can I tell you a quick story? Sorry, just to go off.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was at Kings Lynn and I stood for the first half in our end, and there was one inflatable which remained nameless was floating around, and it went behind my head, and some bloke behind me went, "Can you get that out of my face?" And I was like, I said, I can't look round because I don't know what I'm going to see at this point. In Grimsby, would you get that basically? So it was. I haven't had an inflatable phallus backed against my head for a long time.
And you know what, Jason, where it ended up? It ended up on Steve Wraith's desk.
How did it get from Kings Lynn to actually? Do I want to know?
It got fished out of the crowd against Stockport. No, against
Kings Lynn won it.
Torquay. It got fished out of the crowd against Torquay and ended up on Steve Wraith's desk.
Oh yes, I remember seeing the image. Well, if it re-emerges at Barnet, we know who's taking it along.
Exactly. He should remain nameless. But, yeah.
There was a little lad next to me. I was saying to his mum, "Why is there an inflatable candle?" I thought that mum's going to be a long journey home explaining that one away.
I mean, I don't know where do you go from there.
Where do you go? It wasn't on my job description to dispose of those inflatables. I can assure you, that's not what they sold me.
No, we didn't know.
I mean, I just feel sorry for the Barnet stewards that are going to be there because it's going to be like some sort of terrible Vietnam-like flashback for that poor soul that got assaulted viciously by an inflatable shark. Mike, Tom, and Ian, and Scott is here as well. Scott's just in the background, working dedicatedly for the next half an hour, I think. So, I mean, I will open it up to our panel first and foremost. Is there anything you would like to ask of our team here, or Mike, Tom, Ian? And then I will go fishing. So, if there's any questions you guys want to ask,
I'll go.
Go ahead.
These are a couple of questions that I've had from some colleagues at COD Almighty. I'll introduce it by mentioning the interesting article that was on the Guardian website today by Adrian Childs regarding club ownership. And so there's two questions really. Do you currently have any way of measuring your own performance as a board, as custodians of the club? And with promotion being a slim possibility, and if it were to be achieved, is there a plan in place, or would there be in the future should promotion become a reality, to make sure the club becomes cemented in the next division and not have a repeat of the last 5 years' performances?
Well, I'll be happy to start, and then maybe Debbie and Andrew can come in. So the honest answer is no. I mean, what we've on the measurement stuff in particular, I'll come to the second part of the question in a moment, but I haven't seen the article today. I mean, in reality, what we've done in the first year is come in and try to be on an accelerated learning curve of trying to work out what needed doing remedially, and what we could do to start establishing the values of the club and the things that we think are going to be foundational for the long term, including hiring Debbie as our first decision and getting some of the infrastructure right, and we're setting the tone for the behaviours and the culture of the organisation. So that's the first thing. We're actually in some strategy sessions in the next few weeks, including we've got an external, some football people are coming to help us now write a 5-year plan for the business. What I would state is that's more about, we've had a cycle of decisions now, in a year of decisions. So we're coming up against stuff that looks vaguely familiar now, rather than everything was new to us, like from May onwards last year. So that's one thing. So we think directionally we've had an accelerated learning curve. I think collectively where we can see opportunity, we can see the work required ahead of us now. Clearer, we knew it a year ago, we see it more clearly. I think now we're going to put some structure around and be more deliberate. I mean, it's not rocket science, though, right? So it's clear strategy, behaviours, good people, right? And then there's some stuff around the edges, but that's any business. So we need to create clarity around the strategy, knowing what we know now. You know, Debbie's done a phenomenal job on the people side, so that's a work in progress, but I think we've made good progress there. And then there's a question around, you know, the strategy more clearly is what are the parameters that we want to operate in, you know, the next 5 years, and there'll be a financial guardrails for that as well, because obviously, whilst Andrew and I are committed to the long term, you know, it's pretty obvious that the amount we can spend as individuals and ultimately collectively as a club is going to be a constituent variable in there. So we're in it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, on measurement. I mean, we feed back to each other regularly, and this isn't about patting you on the back. I think all of us have been on a steep learning curve, and there's work to do. It's more about supporting each other to get that done, and you know, particularly amongst some of the pressure that's felt in the role. But I haven't really thought about it actually. But I think be interesting to see from the sort of broad fan base about what they would like to see as a measurement of our success. I mean, it begins with ends with results on the football pitch, right? But actually, you know, part of our strategy will be defining our own metrics. But I genuinely hadn't thought about, you know, how we would be measured. I think we're judged every minute of every day, right? That's one of the things we've learned.
I mean, I dare say the question was slightly tongue-in-cheek because it's God Almighty, but I thought it was nevertheless quite an interesting question. And I don't know. I would agree. It's probably quite hard to measure. Probably increased attendances, maybe year-on-year increases in membership of Club 1878 would be what I would go to, and then I don't know. Who knows? It's quite difficult, but I think it's quite a poignant topic at the minute with like the Chelsea situation, Derby County, Scunthorpe United, a little bit close to home. There are some difficult ownership questions out there in the whole of football, and I personally would like to see the government and governing bodies come together more to actually establish like a parameter for what club ownership actually means, especially at probably below the top two divisions. I think it's probably a much more local affair and not really realistic to be profit-making organisations either.
But I think when Andrew and Debbie can come in, but I think we know the buckets that we care about, and it's obviously or the on-field performance. There's the community impact, and there's the sustainability of the organisation, and there's some broader stuff around trying to articulate purpose-led organisation and what that means as a beacon of hope and aspiration, not just in the town, right, but elsewhere. So they're the buckets. But I think we'll go through this in the next month. But actually, even if it's tongue-in-cheek, I think it's a valid question, right? Because you know, maybe one of my measures will be the amount of times or the frequency I'm called a tosser on social media or things like that. That'd be what I'd like to see that decrease a little bit. But I think it's a genuine question. I don't know, Andrew, Debbie, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think generally I agree with the buckets. I mean, it's not just about results on the pitch, albeit that's where as fans we care most. But it's about making the difference in the community, making a difference with the academy, making a difference, and making sure we've got an organisation that we can pass on to the next owners, next custodians. That's for me, that's the central part. But I would say we're big fans of the Tracy Crouch fan-led review, and the introduction of an independent regulator to football. I think should be a positive move. I'm going to reserve judgment and say it is a positive move until you kind of understand how it operates, but it should be a positive move because the intentions are clear. I think it's fair to say as we've gone through a sort of 12-month cycle, as Jason said, you've met a number of owners and directors from other clubs, and a lot of them, to be fair, are positive and doing it for the right reasons, but you get the sense that there are a few that probably aren't, and so in the introduction of more stringent both financial and background checks, integrity checks, I think would be a good thing, and I'd almost push it further and say maybe they should also do them retrospectively for the people that are already in situ, but that may be a little controversial.
Thanks.
And of course, we, as Jason said, we've got a strategy session planned, and that will give us that 5-year plan. But obviously, when Jason and Andrew first came in, they embarked on that the big fan engagement piece, and only recently at board we talked about revisiting that, because we do want to make sure that and we're listening at all points to the fan base, and so that engagement as well will give us some intelligence in terms of what the fans are seeing and what the fans are thinking in terms of in addition to some of the other metrics that we set ourselves in due course.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that was all right, Tom. And then asked your question from COD Almighty, who are here as well. Mike, you had a question as well. Then we'll go on to some of the ones the fans have kindly put up, and aren't just about seats and what colour they could be. Mike, what were you gonna ask?
Yeah, hi guys. So there's obviously going to be quite a few questions about things in and around the club. So my question's really to you individually. First season in now, how have you found it in terms of the scrutiny and pressure that comes with running a football club? Obviously, from your backgrounds, working in business and what have you, I don't think you'd have had the sort of the scrutiny and a fan base to deal with. So how have you found that? Is it what you expected? And just your thoughts on that, really.
I'll maybe start this time. Yeah, it's definitely been different to any other business experience that I've had before. And for those of you who don't know, I'm kind of involved in quite a wide variety of businesses, not just pure property, but things like schools and pubs and nursing homes and other sort of property related stuff. But this is definitely a different order of magnitude and a different set of skills needed to be able to navigate through things. And again, we often get asked the question, are you enjoying it? And I think the question is that caveated yes, is certainly it's a challenge, but the fact that the team is measured every all the time, but predominantly on a Saturday or Tuesday, and I think this season's been probably as good example of any of that, where we've gone through the first third of the season where we were on the crest of a wave, and there was a real feel good factor, and then we had that bad run of form where by fine margins, but still the results weren't good enough, and then now with the kind of rejuvenation over the last couple of months, and hopefully catapulting us forward towards the opportunity to have a chance to get up out of this league. And that, on the pitch, you can see there's been a real variety of emotions. But obviously the experience, between inverted commas, we went through related to the badge was was a learning curve for all of us. But I'd like to think that we've done our best in the circumstances, and we're going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and just got to make sure we learn from them and make sure that we listen and continue to listen, as Debbie said, in terms of continuing to engage with the fans as closely as possible. And that's for me you've got a constituency that's not just your shareholders. It's a much wider group that you need to think about.
Well, do you want to go, Debbie?
Okay, I would say that it's probably the job where I've felt the most scrutiny and pressure ever, particularly around social media. I feel very cautious whenever I think about posting anything, for fear that it'll be misinterpreted, that someone will read something into it that I absolutely didn't mean. So I found myself being much less open. I've been open on social media. I'm always open and transparent, but I think more before I post, and I've never posted anything dodgy, but certainly in terms of social media, I'm much more aware of that. I feel an absolute privilege to be in the role, but I also feel the responsibility, because I know how much it means to people, and that's grabbed me too. So it means a lot. It means a lot to me. In terms of how I've experienced the job, I'd say I 90% love it, and then 10% go to an extreme where I just don't really like it at all. But then I go back to loving it, and it's been scattered. The last 11 months for me has been scattered with some just amazing experiences, just absolutely amazing. And I'm always surprised. A couple of days ago, I was in Boots in Grimsby, and a guy just randomly came over to me and said, thanks for everything that you're doing. We think you're all doing a great job. And I found myself so shocked that he would say that to me. I just said, thank you. And what I really meant was, oh, thanks so much. And what do you think to this? And what do you think to that? But I'm always really stunned that people give that feedback, and it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely when it's nice, but it won't be when it's not so good. And I think that'll be quite tough for me as an individual, because I'm quite a sensitive soul. So 90% love it, 10% it's a bit dodgy.
And I think Debbie, just to build on, I think Debbie takes most of the pressure out, because she's in the business day to day, hour to hour, feeling this as well. So I just build on that. For me, it's like, we've been building businesses for 25 years, and I like the pressure of that. So I think Dan Carter, the All Black, talks about pressure privilege. Nothing in your life comes from taking it easy or shying away from difficult things. Now, I reframe everything like this. It's great to be challenged. It's great to be in pressure situations, because that's where you learn, that's where you grow, that's where you're. But at the same time, I'm also a big fan of the idea. It's been characterized in loads of different ways over the years, in different ways, but decided that you're never as good as people think you are. You're never as bad as people say you are. If you can sail a steady course through the middle of that and treat both the sort of same, which we tend to do, you respond to both, but don't get veered into that. When things are going well, we don't think we're brilliant. When things have been going shit, we don't think we're awful. And it's trying to calibrate those things and both. And I've swung both ways. There's been some amazing moments, largely game related, right? But there's been some awful things, just some of the fan base. There is a bit of the fan base that is entitled and just think, just asking us to pony up money all the time. They don't seem to appreciate or through rationally the emotional responses I get, and that's football, right? We want to be emotional about the game, But then when it veers into the sort of lack of respect, and it's like it is our family's money ultimately, and we want to make this sustainable because we love it as fans, and it matters to us that we hopefully shore it up for the next 143 years. So it's just like sniping stuff about do X or do Y or just spend this or do that. We're really thoughtful about this. It matters to us. We want to build it in the right way. We want to build the culture, put all the infrastructure in place so it's stronger when we leave. And, it will outlive us, whether that's 10 years, 20, whatever. And so that's a little bit. So I've dialed out that bit, listening to that. There's an old adage, only take feedback from people that matter to you. And there's another bit from one of my bugbears is there's some people in the town who've got money that could be coming in alongside us to support the project, and them moaning about it and moaning without offering any support. What's been absolutely beautiful about the last 12 months is the amount of support and offer of help from everybody, in every dimension. And there's a couple of people that take pot shots at what's going on, but don't want to own the solution, don't want to step into the ring and have a go with it. And I've got no respect for that. So for me, on net, it's been great. It's a massive learning opportunity. I love working with Debbie and Andrew. That's been the biggest gift of this. And I can see how we can make progress. But also, I know that there'll be ups and downs, and we won't take either of them too seriously. But that's a lesson for life. I didn't learn that here. That's life in general. Excuse me.
I mean, is this when I'm meant to be a proper journalist and do the Matt Dean thing and ask you who those people are? Or have you had, obviously, with it being roughly a year, and it's obviously a year to yesterday since a relegation was confirmed, have you had a chance, the three of you, to sort of reflect on the journey you've gone on in the last sort of year and a bit? Because the club off the field anyway seems almost unrecognizable to the one you joined. I mean, inflated footballs aside, it's been a transformation, hasn't it? Or am I being too kind?
Probably. I mean, from my point of view, it's lovely for you to say that first and foremost, and we appreciate it. I think one of the characteristics of entrepreneurship, and also Debbie's got it as well, is that you don't dwell on the positives. You tend to want to think about all the stuff that you can do and make a difference in. I think it's a good trait. It can be damaging as well. So we have to make the space at the right point. It's not now. It'll be the end of the season where we take. And this is the idea of a strategy day where we'll go away for a couple of days and reflect and think about what we've learned, what we can do better, where's the investment cases, where's the strategy. So, I don't mind. David doesn't mind me sharing, but part of our exchanges every week when we speak, most days is just a reminder because Debbie's got so much on and is trying to achieve so much. It's me trying to remind her actually of how much she's achieved, and it is really her work in the organising day to day in such a short space of time. So we leave a little bit of space for that, but we can just see how much there's to do, and then that is both, encouraging because we know what needs doing. You can see where you can make improvements. There's just a lot to do, and we're all impatient as fans are. We want to get to it quickly, and the two variables we've got are time and money, right? And so things like they'll take longer if we can spend more, or they'll to be short if we can spend more, or they'll be longer if we can't. And we've got to work that out about what are the priorities. But no, I think maybe at the end of the season, post the London Stadium, hopefully, and thinking about where we're going next year in a new division, that might be a time for celebration. But for now, there's work to do to the season, and I think if we judged ourselves, it's been okay so far. If we end up still in this league at the end of the year, I don't think we'll be patting ourselves on the back because we can see the work ahead. But I think we appreciate the fact that there's the sentiment amongst the fan base has largely been positive since we've had this run of form. But it was horrible, right? When we had 10 losses and we felt it, or we didn't win for 10 games, it was horrible. I mean, people shouting for Paul's job. I mean, one of the things that I really don't like is this public discussion about people's jobs and their contracts. Can you imagine you having a shit couple of weeks at work and everyone at work talking about should you be sacked or not? It's mental that the pressure calls under. We should be thinking about how he knows more than any of us when things are going badly. No one needs to tell him. No. So it's about how you actually make him feel better and stronger in those situations, not making him feel more pressure. So that's weird, but that's football, right? But
I was going to say we won't have a podcast.
Just on that, do you ever have any conversations? Maybe you can't tell us this, but I've always wondered in those situations when a manager is under pressure and he does have a supportive board like yourselves, in that run, for example, would you have had those conversations with Paul where he's like, it's okay, just keep doing what you're doing? Because there was, I think you mentioned it earlier, Jason, there was quite a few games like the Notts County game and the Chesterfield game at home where we did lose by those fine margins. And on another day, it would have gone our way and we would have got like 6 crucial points perhaps from those games.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't breach confidence in the specifics, Tom, but it's valuable. We're clear on our values and it's a long-term project. So no situation in that situation should Paul felt that, look, if we'd lost 20 games, it might look different, right? But he knows that. That's part of the job. That's the world he inhabits. In that situation we were in, we're talking long-term. If we'd have gone in that situation and it would have undermined everything we believe to be true. And so we were analytical. We had a lot of conversations around the data that we had, performances, and it just to us, it didn't seem like a decision. It wasn't even a conversation because looking at the data, looking at performances, and looking at the desire, it wasn't even in the room, to be honest with you. So because of our values have been set out so clearly, so at no stage did we have to say to him, your job. He knew that. And we had those conversations because he's telling us what he's trying to do and the pressure. And we were looking at the data. So, and we had a plan. We had 4 scenarios as well. But no, it's an incredibly odd situation that there was all this noise outside of it. But internally, we were like, it's going to come good. We can see the effort. If you look at the data, you look at the performances and we were getting smashed or we were weak or bad decisions being made, there was nothing. We're obviously scoring goals, right? You don't need an analyst or a PhD in football. We wasn't scoring goals. And we were losing by a couple of shit performances, but we have shit performances now and again anyway. But on the whole, we were doing all right. We just wasn't winning. Now, no, winning's quite important in football, right? But it wasn't. When we talk about our values and what matters, output is massive for us, but effort and values and approach is as important, if not more important. So it's just interesting. It was a great experience to go through, and for our values to be completely untested in the middle of that. 'Cause at no stage did we go, his job's on the line, and I love that. And that was Andrew and Debbie and I, to think about this first time round, and none of us talked about within those games that we were going, next, if he doesn't win the next game, he's out. It just didn't even come in the conversation because we know it's a building season. We know he's making progress. We can see what he's done every window, and we believe it. We believe in him, right? And he shares our values. So it was a really positive experience on the other side of it because we didn't get concerned. We didn't get histrionics. So I don't know. Again, Debbie and Andrew, I'm probably rambling a bit too much. I don't know if that reflects your view on it as well.
I would say that, and this probably isn't, I get the feeling that this isn't usual in football. I don't have a lot of experience to base that on, but based on some conversations that I've had with other people in the world of professional football. But what I would say is we're all a team. And we can see how much it means to Paul. And if we couldn't see how much it meant to Paul, then that would tell us something completely different, as Jason's just said. So on the basis that we're a team and we all want success for Grimsby Town Football Club, I saw it as my role very much to try and support Paul on some kind of emotional level, as I would do with any other member of a team when they're experiencing significant pressure. And that's the way I think we'll always continue to operate. It's to me that's not rocket science. That's how you operate within a good team, and I don't think football should be any different. And we did, as Jason said, we didn't need to have that conversation, but I was regularly at Cheapside just checking in and having a feel of how morale and motivation levels were, because that's what you do with any other team.
I'd also, just to build on that again, is that your ethics and your values show up in small ways. They're often not bad big decisions. So the way you build cultures in businesses, and we think in football clubs, it's stating your values and living them, and then demonstrating them in your decision making and how you approach people, how you treat people. So for us to be talking about long-term, committed to the club, committed to this, and then if we have a run of bad luck, firing the manager, would be completely undermined everything we're saying. So cultures are built by living your values and your behaviours showing up in small ways in all of your decisions and conversations. So it felt like a real opportunity for us in that moment to go, this is who we are, this is what we believe to be true. And here's a situation where it was tested, and we just didn't flinch. It just wasn't. But the pressure was interesting. It was a learning experience just to see so many people saying, get rid and stuff. And we're like, actually, this is where we stay on course and not. And again, but I mean this, by the way, it applies as much to when things will go well, because you're only a couple of results away from either, right? So and both can't be true, and both are true, right? So it's odd in of itself to be tested in that way. But it was good to come to personally to come and with Andrew and David and Paul and feel like it was vindicated as well, without really being at a point where we're having to make a decision.
I mean, it's an interesting one, especially with the way the results went. You almost famine and feast, wasn't it, for a bit of time? It's an interesting way to have had a season. One of the questions I've got to ask now, because Jason brought it up, was the big white elephant in the room in terms of the playoff final. What has been the club's response to that, and have you been able to have dialogue with the National League about probably the illogical place to have a final, given 5 of the 6 teams are north of the sort of Nottingham?
Shall I start on this one? Is that okay? So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we could see the instant response from the fan base. We weren't aware of it before everyone else was. The communication came from the National League about the same time as it went public. So obviously we talk to all the clubs, and we make sure that we use every avenue possible to us as a club to feed back on the views of our fan base. Where I would say that we are hugely fortunate at Grimsby is that we've got the Mariners Trust. They were incredibly active straight away, proactive, talking to the Football Supporters Association, who are now talking and in regular dialogue with the National League. Whether that will change the outcome, I don't know, but obviously the National League have got an opportunity now to listen to what fans from many of the clubs are saying. And I know that the Football Supporters Association have now agreed to a broader dialogue with the National League. So that's there will be a positive outcome in that they've asked the National League now, and the National League have said yes. But we are really fortunate to have the Mariners Trust to step up too. And I don't know whether other fan bases have such great representation.
I don't think they do. We were looking to try and find them to just sort of get them all together, and we couldn't. Even the Wrexham Trust has gone very quiet since their takeover, which is interesting. Well, thanks very much. Well, you never know. I hope it stays down in London, as does Mike, but maybe not so much everybody else.
It's a short trip on the Jubilee line for me. It's fine.
It is odd, though, isn't it? I mean, they call it for what it is. Like no, we can make mistakes, and I think everyone's acting with positive intent. But no one minds Wembley. Wembley is what it is, and that even though the date clashes with the Jubilee. But if you're going to change it from Wembley, then you'd think there'd be a bit more process, a thoughtful process. So I'm hopeful it's something that they realise that doesn't make sense on any dimension really, and can hold their hands up, and I think they'd get a lot of respect if they can do that, actually, because we all do make mistakes. But if you look at all the clubs involved at the top end of the table, and actually there's a whole thing about London-centric in this country anyway, as we all know, having lived in London for so many years. It wouldn't be a bad idea to take it out of London anyway. But I'm hopeful that the activation, the feedback that they've got from it, will give them a chance to show real integrity and change their mind. People don't mind mistakes, people actually don't mind it even more if you've changed your mind and do it with an apology. And I think there's a real opportunity for the National League in this situation because it's clearly a bad decision.
I suspect that they're contracted, and it'll be quite difficult for them to make a change, and they'll blame that. But let's see.
Well, it don't really bother me. And won it at Bristol City's ground last year, so they have taken out. Like, it amuses me that everybody sort of gets on their high horse about it, especially Wrexham, who are a Welsh club playing in the English League. You know, they haven't really got a leg to stand on with regards to their criticisms.
I think the big Tom for me though, but there's a bit about the Jubilee weekend expense as well. I think there's something. I think the train schedules. You'd like to think there's someone sat there going, "What's that? What else is happening in London on this day? And what does that mean for cost and stuff?" And I mean, you're right. I mean, the way they can play it in Timbuktu and would go if we get to the final, wherever they put it on, we'll be there if we get there, right? I think that, you know, ultimately we care about being in there and getting out, but there's just something about being more thoughtful about it in this day and age. You know, the expense.
I mean, what surprises me, I think the National League's actually based in Birmingham, in it. They certainly advertised a job that I thought about applying for a few years ago, which was based in Birmingham, and so for me, it would make sense for them to hold the finals at Villa Park because Villa Park has a 40,000 capacity, and they have done that in the past. Stoke-on-Trent as well. And most non-league clubs aren't going to sell 20,000 tickets each. And it's better to be, in my opinion, in a stadium that's pretty much near capacity at best than not. When we played Bristol Rovers in 2015, we played Bristol Rovers in like a half-empty Wembley, and the atmosphere was pretty much non-existent. Not just because like we were significantly outnumbered, but because the ground felt empty. We were nowhere near filling the ground, and I personally think that the National League would do better to select stadiums that they have a realistic chance of filling, which is obviously a criticism that you could level at the London Stadium selection. But the London Stadium is the Olympics. Sorry, I'm ranting. I'll just shut up. Carry on.
No, I think your point's so well made. I'm seriously. I was like, you know, but if it's Wembley, it's Wembley, right? And everyone will sort of put up with that for obvious reasons. I think if you're going to look for an alternative, you'd just like to think people would consider the other variables in control. And the fact it's a Jubilee week and it's expensive and accommodation, whatever else, it just doesn't look like it's been thoughtful. And actually, then the other thing they've made is not actually replying, saying there might be other reasons for this. That, you know, if it is contracted or there's a deal been done, at least come out and say this are the reasons why. So hopefully they've got an opportunity, right, in the next week as to do that. So hopefully there's something where you go, actually, it makes sense, and we'll just have to put up with it. But if not, you know, they can always change their mind.
Let's have it at Sinsel Bank. Ian, what were you saying?
Hi, folks. So recently, well, every time we've been on with you, to be fair, we've asked about the potential of the stadium move. There's obviously been a lot of conjecture around the club for a long time. I think it's getting on for, 30 years since Coco Stadium was first proposed. So it's certainly been excuse me, a long way from the groundwork. Recently as well, we've probably seen in a few games, such as Stockport, where I think we didn't quite tip 8K, but we were, to all intents and purposes, sold out. And I know that there's been some conversation between yourselves as to whether we renovate Bundle Park or whether we move. Does anything with the recent matches in terms of capacity of Bundle Park? Really sorry about that. Does anything recently in terms of capacity of Bundle Park and increased attendance with the other things that have been going on around the club, does that help sway you one way or the other, or is it still kind of all up for discussion at the moment?
I think Ian, we've been pretty clear and consistent that our priority is very much the training ground as being the place where the players go to work 90% of their time, and that's we're spending time on that. You're right. I mean, and again, we were on the record as saying that let's fill Blundell Park, and then we can think about whether there's alternatives. In fact, we have filled Blundell Park, or got close to filling Blundell Park recently, is making us think about whether there are options to add capacity to Blundell Park. You know, the famous green seats, which we all remember from the Newcastle game and Spurs games and so on. That's something that we're currently engaged with the SAG, the Safety Advisory Group, to see what is possible. So it's something that we're thinking about, but again, for the time being, no active plans to move to a larger stadium.
I think also to build on that, there aren't that many clubs that are going to bring a sufficiently large away crowd in this league or the next one, actually, that I think will make it a problem for us on a regular basis. I'd like to be proven wrong, right? But it's took Stockport to bring a brilliant away following for us to start thinking about these questions. So again, it'd be a really good problem to have if we were tipping at sort of 8,500, 9,000 every game. But that's going to have to mainly come from our own fan base, because you just don't see that a lot in this league or two, to be honest. So
I know when I mentioned this, it's a very, very large scale investment, and I'm very conscious that you've mentioned a few times, it's your family's money at the end of the day. So I don't want to sound like one of your people on Twitter who's saying, get your hand in your pocket, Stockwoods. But do you think there's a little bit chicken and egg situation with it? You say about wanting larger attendances at Blundell Park to look at expansion or new stadium, but perhaps if a new stadium with better facilities for fans was there, perhaps you might get increased footfall through that way as well. And again, I appreciate it's a huge investment to go for a new stadium.
It's interesting you've just quoted that exact Twitter quote exactly. We should have a word about that afterwards. About it was all anonymous. But
I'm not anonymous on Twitter. You're all right.
It just doesn't make economic sense. A good stadium would be 20, 30 million quid at least, right? And adding another couple of say we could add regular attendances of, let's say, 12,000, right, which was so far off, right? Even that wouldn't stack up. But all the work you'd need, the capital, and I'm just not sure what else we could add that would get us to the sort of 20,000. If you look at clubs, even get to the Championship and struggle, don't they? Those sort of numbers. So for me, the economics of doing stadiums, Andrew again knows a lot more than I do about this, used to be, enabling projects, supermarkets or housing developments or whatever. And that landscape's changed as well dramatically over the last 10 years. So unless it's a massive vanity project that you just want your name over something, and neither Andrew and I do, so that's never going to happen, is that you can torch your own money on it to get that goal, but it's got to be sustainable. It just doesn't stack up economically. So I'd never say never, because if we can nudge up to those sort of double figure plus fan base every game, crowds every game, and we can bring in different type of commercial partners and get around the edges, I can't see that in the next 5 years as being a path. Everything we know about our town, everything we know about the fantastic support, I just don't think there's a doubling of our attendances today waiting to happen because we get better hot dogs, or we put B-days in the toilets. I just two own suggestions, by the way, not anything that the fan. So yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I've seen nothing in the last year. Now, can we improve Blundell Park? Definitely. Will we keep improving Blundell Park? Look, absolutely. It'll be incremental, as we've said. That's our philosophy. But I'm struggling to see both the economic and the emotional argument for moving away from Blundell Park in the near term. And the economic one is driving it first and foremost. So, but as Andrew stated, we've been really clear on this. It's not something we're talking about because it will make itself known as a priority in the next couple of years by the fact that we're selling every game, we've got excess capacity being demanded, and we're pushing people away at the doors. And I just can't see that. I'm an optimist, but I just can't see it. Doesn't mean we won't keep improving, but the economic argument for a new stadium is just not something we're talking about, because there's so much more we can be doing, spend energy on, and energy and focus is finite. So is that fair, Ian, by the way? Because we keep pushing this away because we want to be clear to people. But if there's something we're missing, we're open to that as well. But we think around the table, we've got the right people thinking about the right priorities. But I'd love to hear back from people if people think missing something.
I think, well, I don't know about you. Sorry. Just because Freeman Street's available, it feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's the only thing. If we're talking about Great Coats or Peaks Parkway or anything like that, then I don't care. Stay at Blundell Park for the next 1,000 years, because I don't need to walk through a cemetery or through a newt infested field to care. I think that's the only thing that is for me. I mean, my question would be, is Blundell Park shrinking? Because I'm slightly worried it's an 85-year-old lady who's just getting shorter, because the capacity seems to, where every time, is there someone stealing seats? Because every time I think that you worry, you turn around, someone's stolen another one, because we've gone from, I think it was temporary, this is how nerdy I am, temporary seating with the green seats was 10,033, then I think it was 9,502, and now it's, the capacity for Stockport was, what was it, just shy of 8,000. Have you found out who's stealing the seats, and is there a reason why it's shrinking?
I can't comment on previous figures, but I can tell you that the capacity is currently 9,032. And I can also say that, I know that some of our fans have commented on the fact that we potentially could have sold more seats in the Osmond for the Stockport game, and we had some tarpaulin out. And I just want to reassure the fan base, really, that if we are covering seats with tarpaulin, we want to sell as many seats as we possibly can. We want to bring that income into the club. So if we're covering those seats, even though it might seem ineffective to the fan base, it will be because either the SAG or the police have asked us to bring in those measures. And the chances are that by putting that tarpaulin there and trying to reassure the police that might mean a reduction in our police charges, etc. So we'll always be weighing those up in terms of the best way to manage a game and working with our partners. And I know that the fans would understand that those relationships are so important. They really are when it comes to managing a stadium like this. So, but I can clarify, it's 9,032 currently, without any additional temporary green or any other coloured seats.
There is someone sad enough, not just including me, that will go around counting. There are games when there's no action, and we will be doing it.
if I could also just add,
go ahead.
I mean, the also got to remember that during the Stockport game we had the red zone, which the ridiculously large red zone behind the dugouts, which Debbie and the team were able to just get removed for Torquay. So there were COVID reasons, segregation reasons, safety reasons why we couldn't sell more tickets, because I think we probably could have sold more tickets had the seats been available. We've also obviously we've talked about reflecting back after a year. Have you been taken aback by how crowds have increased? We rose the stat up last week that this is the highest average attendance we've had since we were in the championship, since 2003. So the last season we were in the championship, it hasn't been this high. Have you been taken back by people's willingness to come back? Or it's been amazing. I mean, the support has been incredible, and I think the team at home, you're seeing the team respond at home as well in terms of performances, and it does become a bit of a virtuous circle, doesn't it? In that Blundell Park is a fortress. There, people come along. If Grimsby are winning, then they'll come back, and we've obviously also been working hard to encourage sort of families along and try and make it a more family friendly environment. But there's always more to do. But yes, I mean, it's been fantastic to see the crowds back. And as a fan, I know that we're gonna play better when we've got supportive, vociferous, rowdy fan base behind us.
Do you know? Interesting. So one of the things that being on the inside of the club now, I often thought as a fan, does it really matter to players? And actually it matters immensely. And I thought it was just something they said, but it's been fascinating talking to Paul and to all the players about it. It really makes a difference, right? And I just thought it was just something that they said, but it's just, you can see it, can't you, in the emotion in the games and what it means to them. And actually for me, one of the highlights this year was actually the Stockport game. It's actually before the game kicked off, interestingly. Afterwards, it was a completely different experience as well. But I was like really overwhelmed by thinking everyone has to make a choice whether they come to a game, and knowing how hard it is for people, that could be a choice of one thing or another as well. And I was like, what a thing for the community to have this place full and the energy being so positive and playing against one of the best team in the league as it was. It was like I was like, this is just magical, and I was quite overwhelmed. And it was just see that and think about everyone that puts their hand in the pocket to come makes a conscious choice to support the club, and it's it's I found that really powerful.
I've had a few friends come up from Derbyshire recently, and because they've never been to Blundell Park, I mean, I have friends come on a regular basis, but some friends that hadn't been to Blundell Park recently came for the Stockport game, and they'd had it in their calendar for a while. And I remember just standing there and feeling this immense pride. And I was saying to them all, what do you think to this? Because our crowds are just something to behold. There's no way that cannot have an impact on those players. I mean, one thing we have got to try and work out is how you move through the academy and get into Blundell Park and then not feel that intense pressure, how we almost prepare some of our young lads for the fact that wow, this is a massive crowd compared to what they'll have been used to as they come through the academy. But I just feel emotional sometimes when I hear it, and when the fans are at their best, it is just awesome.
Can I just, I don't know if I've told you this story before, but it's one of my favourites of the year. One of the highlights, when we, Lisa and the team did a great job of getting the kids in the Osmond, and it was one of the first games, and Debbie hadn't seen many, and basically Debbie turns around to me and said, "Oh, it's beautiful. The kids are singing." And I was like, listen to what they're saying. It's the most Grimsby thing you'll ever hear in your life. She's like, "What?" And when she heard it, she turned around, she went, like her face just dropped. I was like, it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. In a couple of octaves higher, them shouting at the goalkeeper. I thought it was brilliant. But Debbie thought they were singing something. Couldn't quite hear as clearly maybe as others, but that was a nice moment.
I think they should be in there all the time. My nerdy thing was that the academy kids should be the ball boys and stuff. You remember when Jose, this might be an Andrew and Jason thing rather, but the ball boy throwing the ball quickly to score that goal. Have the lads with the pressure doing that. I guess we should really. Jason Paget has asked. I think he's a bit nervous. Jason's the same as me. He said he's worried about contract policy. Seems similar to previous eras. He's slightly worried about the Player of the Year awards this year, and whether Hull City are going to be following them off the stage to sign them a new contract. How are things going off the pitch with contract talks? I don't expect any announcements here, but I imagine they're well underway. And does the fact that you don't know what league we're in make it more difficult, or?
I'd say not, actually, Alex. I think a lot of the players that we want to retain. We obviously want to improve the playing staff if we got the league, but we think we're playing at a level that would be top end of League Two now. In the top 5 or 6 in the National League would compete really, really well in League Two with the current team. I think the answer I would give you is it's a continuous process. We're pleased with some progress, but again, we'll kind of leave it to kind of later in the season to make formal announcements.
Don't worry. I know it's easy for us to say, but it matters to us that we build the stability for the long term. It matters to Paul. Paul knows he's got our support, so that work is ongoing. We won't win them all. Players have real choice in this as well, obviously, but it's very well progressed. And we've said publicly a number of times that we want this. I mean, what is in the public domain is being Gavin in recently. I mean, you can see, I think you made a comment on one of your podcasts. That is symptomatic of how we want to think about signings, is get the core in, players that are committed to the club and feel secure about their future. So you'll find in the next couple of months, when we actually do make the announcement, that's consistent with what, and Paul knows that, so that'll be consistent.
And that's been the policy from January when we bought Jordan McGrath in. I mean, again, that wasn't just a signing to the end of the season; it was a signing for next season as well. Because Paul recognised that and I think we all are seeing that he's got the quality, and the quality that will help us do well in whatever division we're in.
That was a controversial signing in my house, Andrew. My wife didn't speak to me for a couple of days afterwards with her Woking shirt on.
Right.
What did you want to?
Can we just dwell on that though for a second? Because I think that I try not to talk individually about players because I think it would be unfair. But people asked about Paul, but if you look at the signings he makes, then for someone who's not a professional like him, it's not always obvious, right? And he's making adjustments and improving the squad every decision. I think now we know what we've got. Now we know the league. Now we know what we're faced with. And I think he doesn't get the credit among a lot of the fan base for Jordan pulling him out. You look at that. Someone wasn't playing at Woking, wasn't fit necessarily, and Paul Touch was like, he told us what he thought of the lad and what he could do, and he's been vindicated, right? And so I think Paul doesn't get enough credit for A, how hard he works behind the scenes on this stuff, B, the insight he has, how he knows to look at a player. And so giving him the long term, I feel really confident about us keeping improving. That's what we want, right? So I mentioned that because, again, I would never get drawn into individual players' performance because, it's not fair. But I think on Paul, people don't talk about the fact that the improvements that he's making, now we know what we've got and what we're working with. We won't always get it right, but more often than not, he does. And I think he doesn't get the benefit or the credit of that from the fan base a lot often. But obviously, I'll check my Twitter feed afterwards to get the feedback on that.
I mean, I want to go to Mike, but I guess one of the questions I'd love to ask as well is Chris and Paul are two of the people that can give you the contrast between what it was before and after. I don't want to go into too specifics, but what's their general feedback been in terms of the club off the pitch and the changes that have been made since they were here last time? And I'm sorry, Mike, I know I said you could go next.
It's not Paul setting up the anonymous Twitter accounts, is it, Jason?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't ask him, actually. That's a good one. Debbie, you've got a better idea day to day, haven't you? I mean, we're pleased with both of them, and there's a phenomenal relationship, values led. But Debbie, you'd have a better insight. You see him every day, don't you, more or less?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to speak for Paul and Chris, but I think it's obvious, that they see the intention, they see the values, they see the long-term approach, and it's bound to be refreshing. It's absolutely bound to be refreshing. So, like I said, I don't want to speak for them both, but it from what I see, it feels good. You can see what they're building at Cheapside. You can feel positivity. So I think that's a great sign. It absolutely is bound to feel differently for both of them.
Mike, do you want to go?
Yeah, no worries, mate. So I've got a question from Mick Hansen. He wants to know how can Wrexham all of a sudden be allowed to stream a midweek game? Wants to know if that's something to do with them being a celebrity club. But if I could just add myself a question on there. I know you've spoken before in previous podcasts about the deal with BT and streaming, but also the amount of time it takes for highlights and things to come out. So I don't know if you could maybe speak about that a little bit.
I can pick up on the Wrexham one if you want me to. Yeah, so we did look into that. We know what our fans want, particularly our ex-our fans, and we understand that Weymouth were given special dispensation by the National League to allow for that game to be live streamed, and we understand that the basis for that could have been the fact that it was a 900-mile round trip midweek. Obviously, Wrexham have streamed other games, but they've been FA Trophy or FA competition games, so they've been subject to different rules. But that's our understanding of that midweek one against Weymouth. And I think, you know, Andrew, I'm sure will say that we're constantly looking to review this. We know, we've heard the fans, we know what the fans want, and you know, Andrew regularly asks me and takes it up with the National League. So
yeah, it's something that's very, very high on our agenda, and it'll be raised at the annual meeting coming up.
Were they able to find the contract for you though, Andrew? I remember the last time we met, they were struggling to find it, weren't they?
Oh, they haven't been prepared to share it with us yet.
Okay.
I think Wrexham's a special case, by the way. Bearing in mind they've got a whole camera crew and streaming capability of their own that is following them around to make a Netflix series. I'm not sure they need broadcasting. They've probably got their own film crew and own satellite in the game to them. So I think that's probably a special case.
Well, I have seen Ryan Reynolds on Twitter a few times earlier in the season saying he was watching the game back in America, so that's quite interesting.
Maybe they've got iFollow. We certainly should. What was Ian? What were you going to say? You were going to ask one, were you not?
Do you want to let Tom just ask his follow-up, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Thanks, Ian. Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering if, with regard to the sort of live streaming of midweek games and away games and such, if you have any concerns as a board about that, taken away from the fan base that turns up at Blundell Park. You obviously seem quite keen to get a result on that for fans who have complained about it. But I know from my experience of being a season ticket holder for lower division clubs abroad is that live stream games for top level teams tend to actually impact on attendances at the lower level. And do you not worry that this could sort of have a similar effect for us?
Again, I think that's why you have the sledgehammer to crack a nut rule of the blackout window, 3 o'clock on a Saturday, which again feels sacrosanct. I think the experiment that happened during COVID with and the engagement that the clubs managed to retain, and frankly the revenue was able to be generated for both the league and the clubs, means it's something that should be seriously looked at. And some people will. It will. I suspect in practice it will widen the fan base rather than narrow the fan base, because you get a very different experience watching a football match on your phone when you're doing 20 other things to being fully and completely engaged in a live entertainment venue.
I think the other thing just to add is, like, I think most fans get this, but the club doesn't exist without match day revenue. It's really that simple. So I think most 90% of the fan base understand that when we talk about this is a project for all of us, that is not just figurative, that is literal. Right? If for some reason people started to watch it at home and we got a little bit of revenue from that, if it wasn't additive, if it was zero sum game where we took one from the other, the club wouldn't exist. It just wouldn't have the revenue stream. So I think the thing that we're trying to explain to people is that, and this is in fairness to the Tracy Crouch review and the fan-led review that Andrew referenced earlier, we're delighted with where it's got to, but it needs to be executed now because the economics aren't sustainable. Because whichever way you look at this, a club is beholden on someone who has the resources putting their hand in the pockets, and it's not trivial. And actually, places like Grimsby, where it matters so much, we need to find, and that's only lots of clubs up and down the country, by the way, but this is the only one I care about really, is that we need to find a way of making it sustainable, and fans need to understand that literally every time they make a decision to come to a game, that is supporting the club and helping us do what we need to do collectively. Likewise, every time someone spends something in the fan zone, buys a shirt, it's literally that much of a connection. So I think our fan base gets that if there's suddenly a cheaper option than stay at home, but we can say to them, look, you might be able to go for a tenner, but we lose this bit of revenue as a result of that. I think fans would get that. Notwithstanding, I think the most thing is the point Andrew made, which is it's just night and day, isn't it? The idea of sitting, for all the convenience of sitting in your pants watching on your phone at home, it's such a different experience to being at Blundell Park and feeling part of the community in real time. And it's just it's not comparable in my mind. But I keep stressing that point, that we keep saying it, that this our cash will run out at some point. So, we have to make sure it's sustainable, and we have to know that fan supporting is a literal thing for a club like Grimsby until there's a massive change in the way football's financed. And we're not scared by that, by the way, but just this is why, whether Andrew or somebody else, it puts fans in such a vulnerable position if it isn't people that really care about the football club deep in their DNA. And so, it has to be a collaboration amongst the whole town to make this work. Otherwise, it won't work. It becomes a plaything of rich people, and that's just not good for anyone.
Something you mentioned then is about obviously making the club sustainable, which everybody needs to have, in the sense of it being able to fund itself moving forwards. Are there any obvious major gaps? Well, I'm sure you have identified major gaps with all your business minds, but kind of what's the main focus for you to push it towards being self-sustaining?
Oh, it's dead easy. It really dead easy. It's a simple way. It's just hard to execute on, which is, businesses aren't that complex. You want to earn more than you spend, right? And football just doesn't work that way. Like, the amount we can get in revenue, and a lot of clubs down below even below Premier League, they just don't. There's not enough income where when you've got competitive wage structures, it just stacks up. So we can absolutely improve the commercial proposition of the club, and Debbie's doing that, and that will do. But it won't close the gap on the salaries that we're going to need to pay to be competitive at the top end of this league and the next league, right? So there's three components. There's controlling your cost base, there's increasing your revenues through commercial, and then there's regulatory frameworks. That means that it's just not, because at the moment, if more money comes out of the Premier League to all the clubs below them, it's just going to go on players' wages. We'll end up in exactly the status quo. And whilst I want people to be paid well and paid fairly, the system's got to work, and it's got to work for the long term. Whereas I think most players would say, whilst they want, players down our level are just making a living, right? They're not millionaires, they're making a living, and you want to see them paid well, but not if that jeopardizes the future of football clubs and the system we've got. So the things we can control, we will change. We will make sure we improve the commercial offering and value proposition. We'll make it more enticing for people to want to come and spend time at the club. But there's a regulatory component as well. The current system is broken, and the fan-led review has components that could correct that and remedy that, but it needs to be enacted now. And so we keep going through the gates on that. But the proof in the pudding will be whether it gets into the Queen's speech and actually gets executed in a way that's equitable and for the long term.
And linking into that, following on from a couple of questions as well, obviously there's been a massive cost of living rise over the past year or so, especially within the last few months, in terms of energy crisis and so on and so forth. Is that something that, I guess, concerns you a little bit for trying to push the club to being more sustainable? You've just said yourselves, really, the way that we can get more income is get more fans in the ground, so on and so forth, spending in the club shop and in the fan zone and so on. So is that something in the backs of your minds for next season and potentially the next 2, 3, 5 years?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the cost of living crisis is a real crisis, and people, if you're having to make a choice between whether you heat your house or feed your kids, they're not going to even think about coming to Blundell Park. We've got to solve this. That's not for this podcast, but that's a problem that needs to be solved at a national level. But as far as we're concerned, we recognise that people have choices to make as to whether they choose to come, and we have to make the proposition as enticing as possible. Whether that's the players on the pitch, the performances on the pitch, the facilities, which we can do what we can do with what's there, and making sure that we're smart about the the ticket pricing and ticket sort of availability for matches that may be slightly less high profile, where we know we're going to end up with some empty seats. So that's very much in our minds. And then but the key thing, I think, in terms of helps to bridge that gap is looking for support from local and regional businesses that kind of want to go on this journey with us and show commercial support for what is a an institution within the town. I mean, one positive thing which I talk about pretty regularly is that businesses looking at their sort of environmental social agenda, supporting a local institution like Grimsby is something that should be pretty high up there, because of how much it matters to so many people in the town. So I think the cost of living crisis is real and there, and we recognise people have to make choices. Equally, our costs are going up as well. We still have energy costs. We still have other costs that are going to get squeezed through. So it doesn't help on the metric that Jason so eloquently described earlier on.
And again, I just building that, right? It matters to us, but it's problematic. This is where the people being thoughtful about their comments. We can't just cut the season ticket prices. We'd love to be able to do that, but then that ends up creating a gap because all our costs are going up. So if we did that, then we end up that'll have to be reflected in the playing budget, right? So they're not easy things. They're real, and we want to be sympathetic. Those that genuinely can't afford to come. I mean, we don't. The club's great at this, right? This isn't us. This is the trust. This is the fan base in general. There's loads of people get support to come to matches because they literally can afford to do it. But I think on the whole, we want to be fair about it, but equally, it's not as simple as going. It's hard for people. So the football club, we personally have to absorb that cost because we've already invested in trying to make the institution, sustainable and for the long term. So it's complex. It's real. We're empathetic to it, but it's it's not as easy as just going. We can take the hit because that pops out somewhere else in an organisation that is getting more expensive to run day by day as well. So. But it matters to us is the short answer to the question.
Has anyone got a last question? I'm very aware that Andrew's been stood on what looks like a pub outside Holloway Road for a while.
I'm at King's Cross.
Oh, okay. Go for shawarma across the road or whatever it is.
Touting for business.
That's niche. That is very niche.
That's very 80s. Isn't it?
No, that's the old King Cross. You're showing your age there, Andrew.
You should be outside platform 9 3/4 nowadays. I guess there's a question for you as well. Is there anything? This sounds very hoity-toity of ourselves, but is there anything you want to ask of us, or you would like to say to those who listen that we haven't brought up?
No, I mean, genuine. We listen to the podcast. We appreciate it. We listen to the feedback. It's a great channel for feedback. So it matters. So I really appreciate what you do. I personally would like to see more diverse voices. So whether that's from the trust, from the disabled supporters, from our family, people who bring families to the clubs. I know you guys are brilliant and we value it, but it'd be interesting to get a broader church of voice. But I reckon that people have got to step into that conversation themselves as well. You give your time, your energy, your own expense to do this as well. So it'd be interesting to see how maybe partnering with the trust to get a conversation in real time. We've made ourselves available. Dave and Christian have been phenomenal as board members and as colleagues, quite frankly. So we think we've got a good chance, but we keep saying to them, look, we'll turn up, whatever conversation's needed, we'll turn up and have the conversation. We want to hear the feedback, we're receptive. People hopefully are starting to see in our behaviours that we generally care, we listen, and we're not afraid to change our minds. So, anything you can do to help, make that a regular thing and make sure people realise this isn't a show for us. This is our behaviour. We want to be available and be part of the dialogue on what's right for the club. So look, just commend you for what you did. I said to you before, look, in the sort of spirit of I love it. I listened to the podcast before I thought about buying into the club, and I listen to them all now, and I value the conversations, So and I enjoy them as well, which is also important. I know that's what you're trying to do. So, but I think one bit of feedback from me would be, just have to look around the faces here tonight, right? It's all of a type. So, obviously Debbie company. I did know if I've already offended you a number of times, I know, but I'd love to see more females, more family members, the disabled supporters, ethnic communities, people who don't come to the games. Actually, why aren't people that are fans that don't come? But how you do that, I don't know. But that's one bit of feedback, I guess.
Well, the DMs are always open to not sound as pervy as that does. So anybody who would like to join in is more than welcome to. We were trying to get a kids version of the podcast up and running after sort of some of the stuff that had gone out, and obviously Bruce's Maisie was interested as well. So anybody who wants to, you're more than welcome to. Feel free to bug me.
And actually on that note, Alex, if we can help with that, I'm just thinking about, obviously, Debbie and I are trustees of the onside use, and Andrew's a massive supporter of it in every dimension. So, if there's a tie-up with another organisation, you can have a takeover, by a school or an organisation or one of the youth clubs in the town. It'd be interesting just to see if there's like a mashup of different organisations. Again, don't feel you need to react to this. I think the podcast is excellent, and and I think again, for me, I enjoy it more than anything else, which is important. But if there was opportunities to bring other people, that could be interesting. But if we can help facilitate that, let us know as well.
Tom, come on then. End us on dot matrix ticket printing or something.
Well, actually, I just wanted to ask. I have got a question about programs, but I'll bore that with another time. It was more, do you have any sort of long-term plans to make any links with local other Lincolnshire football teams? Under the previous regime, we went to court a couple of times with Boston United, but I've always felt that making a link.
That's not what you mean by a link, is it?
Making a link with someone like Boston would actually be a good thing. They've got a strong fan base. We could send players out on loan to them. We could have pre-season friendlies that are local, which would be fun for fans. Games for Trinity, another good example. It seems like a missed opportunity to me that Lincolnshire football clubs don't work together for a better platform for all amateur footballers in Lincolnshire to aspire to.
I mean, it sort of happens. It's weird, actually. So it does. Well, we're really careful. It's interesting. The other day when I put that thing on Twitter about Forest Green and Dale and saying, "Look, well done," I got like loads of shit off people saying, veering from couldn't give a shit to absolutely being vehemently nasty. I'm like, it's not a scarcity thing. They don't go up from Division 1 anyway. But so we're like a bit reticent about talking about. Look, there's been some great support. I don't mind saying, actually, if the guys at Lincoln, even before we did the deal, have been amazing in terms of giving us insight and support and counsel and mentoring. But we didn't want to talk about that at the time because based on my Forest Green Rovers comment, there's a subset of the fan base that would take umbrage to that, right? So, but it does happen actually, and it's been one of the more pleasantly surprising things about football is that there are some people in the game that are really generous, and the people at Lincoln City are some of them. The owners, the CEO Liam, they've been fantastic, and we do our bit to reciprocate that amongst other clubs as well. So it might surprise you, Tom, that it does happen a lot anyway, and I think it's delicate about is it worth the shit publicising it, to be honest with you, sometimes, because to spend half the night on people who say we shouldn't be talking to Lincoln about stuff or whatever. But ultimately, there's a lot of space for success for a lot of people, and I think being generous there's a karma in that as well. I think that it does come round, and I think ultimately if we ever play each other, that all bets will. But if we can be supportive and be helpful to all the clubs in our region. Look, I said this to someone the other day. I was like, I take no pleasure in seeing Scunny go down and what they're going through because we know how hard it is. I take a little bit of pleasure. I'm lying, actually, a little bit, but not much. But what I would state is towns like Grimsby, towns like Scott, towns like Lincoln need a thriving football team. It's such a part of our identity. So I know what that means to the town like Scunny. And so for me, I want to see them successful. I want us to be more successful than them, but I want to see them successful in our tailwinds. But on a completely human level, we all know what it means to what our club means to us. And I'd hate to think of, the majority of their fans, there's some that we don't, but the majority of their fans are people like us who care about their town and care about their community. So it does happen in the background, but for that percentage of fans that if we talked about it more openly, that would get. But maybe there's a way of making it more public and more hopeful. But I love the thing with Clee Town this week, where we're going, look, we're supporting them, we're helping them with social media profile and stuff, and we want the town to be successful, and ultimately want the region to be successful, and ultimately want the country to be successful as well. So there isn't a scarcity of success. There's plenty of it in different dimensions. But I don't know, is that a fair reflection?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for your answer. I only mentioned Boston because I've got a soft spot for him, having grown up in Ingermells. So
Brilliant stuff. I mean, I thank you so much again for coming on. Your thoughts are always widely appreciated, and you can only say keep up the good work, because speaking personally, I think it's going great guns, and I don't know what to complain about. It's awful.
Well, it's interesting, actually. But I think when we reflect on the end of the year, I think we should all be proud. And it's the fan base, right? This is a collective endeavour. And any success that we all have this year, we have it together. Is that people have been turning up, people have been committed, you've been doing the podcast, people have been committed to the fan zone, all the people in the trust doing the work. It is a collective effort, and we should remember that. This is a reflection on the community. And any success that we have, it is a collaborative effort, and we should all reflect on that at the end of the season. Hopefully, when we're thinking about a new set of grounds to go to next year, without jinxing it. But whatever way, we should have a think about that and think about how we kick on as well. But thanks for your efforts as well. Genuinely, it's appreciated.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for watching. If there's any questions we haven't asked and you are desperate to have them answered, please do send me an email, and I'll make sure that they get sent to the right people. Because we don't want anyone. I think we got through them all in a roundabout way. It was a bus service, not a taxi service. It got there kind of. Great stuff. Thank you all so much. We'll all see you in the near future, and I will not do the thing because I can't find the thing.